Randall, let's start with you on this one. I want you to define a soft dog. And do you think that dogs, generally speaking today, genetically, are softer than what they were, say, 25 years ago?
I think the dogs of yesteryear, based on how they were being trained and handled and things like that, were harder dogs, right? There's something to be said for those dogs that went through the school hard knocks, and I only say that based on the bite dogs I've worked with. You came out of some of those prisons, man, like you were gonna make it, like you were gonna be fine. I could take you to combat and you'd be okay. And there is some element of that, I think, in the bird dog world. You're not going to combat with them, but I think if you can survive some of those heavy-handed, very stressful training regiments that of yesteryear, there's something to be said about that for those dogs. Where now you've got people that are a little more thorough, break things down much further, and teach the dog things first before we start making dogs really do things on drastic levels. And I think that eventually, yeah, you're going to see a little change, but I don't know that I wouldn't call it a bad thing, in my opinion, because I think you're going to get a lot more good with it too. So,
So, what's your definition of soft dog?
man, that's such a tough one. I don't even know what I
There's
would
no right or
describe them.
wrong, just like what's your gut feeling on it?
Low drive, man, low drive, and a dog that cannot push through any adversity whatsoever, right? So like they hit a hard problem, they say, I can't, I don't want to do this anymore. The hope's not worth the struggle in any case, right? That would be a soft dog for me. They're breaking down the moment that they perceive any sort of pressure they're unwilling for, right? Where the harder dogs, I think, will they've got the spice in them and say, yeah, I'll I'll work through this, I'll push through this, I've got it. That's a tough one to describe for me.
Nate, what's your definition and what do you think?
Uh, I think I I would agree that I think a soft dog is a dog that doesn't handle any amount of pressure well. And pressure could be from the handler using training tools or from the environment or I mean some dogs just like some people that they just existing it seems to be very difficult for them. And so I think that that's a good definition. What always concerns me when I hear, especially in like our space, the gun dog space, when I hear people say soft, is then when I watch them train, their application of pressure is not good. They don't teach their dogs anything first, and so at that point, I think that it's a word that often gets used to blame the dog for shitty training. I think is more often than not what happens in our area. And my reason for saying that is because these dogs for generations have been trained primarily with pressure. And so what you get from dogs that are selected, at some point your selection is biased based on how you are training those dogs. And so these dogs all handle pressure fine for the most part, I think. And so when you see a problem there, I think usually it's not it's a problem with the way pressure is being applied or that the fact that they weren't really taught well beforehand. And so I think that those are the issues. The other thing too is I think there are dogs that are sensitive that are not soft. So there are
Absolutely.
dogs that don't require a lot of pressure, but that's okay. The amount of pressure you're supposed to use is enough. And so if that dog's level that is enough is not a lot, then that's honestly good to me because that means you can go up from there if you need to as the arousal level goes up or if they're doing something they're not supposed to and the consequence for that infraction needs to be more severe. So I don't think that that's a bad thing. And then the last thing that I'll say, just because it's kind of my like it's my thing, is you have a lot more control over how your dog perceives pressure than I think a lot of people think that they do. But there's a lot of prep work that you need to do for that. And if people would do that work, then a lot of that conversation just doesn't come up anyway.
And I'm super glad you clarified the sensitive part because that was the next question I was going to ask for you to explain.
Yeah, and then the only other piece that I think connects to this is people will talk about if you have dopamine dogs or endorphin dogs, right? And so the endorphin dogs are the dogs you give them a little, and then they pick them
Ah,
up a little bit. It's kind of like some people like to
yeah.
get choked or spanked or something, right? Just like you're into that stuff. And then there's the dogs that they are really driven by pursuit of reward, and so those are two different things, and that can be difficult for people too, because like you see like my draw, if I pull her out, I mean I smack the shit out of her all the time because she enjoys it. I mean, she likes roughhousing, she likes getting pushed around, she likes getting like just like smacking her on her ribs and stuff and pushing her around, and she likes it. It's very reinforcing to her. So anything that I do with her, if I play tug with her and I smack her around a little bit, she likes it. But people see that and they're like, he's being mean to his dog.
You dog abuser.
Yeah.
I think you can make a
I get-
little masochist out of most dogs.
Yeah.
Like
It's,
I think it's in all of us to some degree, and I do think yeah you can have a sensitive dog that's not a soft dog. Um, and I really like what Randall said about the hope not being worth the struggle. If I
yeah.
got that right.
Those aren't my written. Someone else said that.
Yeah, yeah. I mean,
That is not my.
those are all.
You know where I got it from.
And we can like I think you can have I recently did one of my own podcasts about this like it just called resilience and I think that's a very important role a trainer plays is like developing resilience in a dog. And so yeah, I do think some dogs are objectively softer than others. Um and I think there's a genetic component to that for sure. Yeah, I mean, some dogs are innately hard or
Do
soft.
you think they're more common now than what they were 25 years ago?
No, and I don't think, but I also don't think they were that much more common 25 years ago, right? I think that gets tossed around a lot. I think a lot of it depends on what we're talking about, but I think if you just take the top of the games, um, I don't think retrievers are softer today. I think there are some differences in the way we train that could have a slight influence. But you got to think like when you say 25 years, I think we need to like recognize that if we call a generation for dogs 2 or 3 years, um, then maybe you know you're getting potentially 8 generations in there. I don't think that's enough for that kind of evolution of emotional state. Personally, like I even if you're really selecting for things, like I mean potentially, but maybe not. I don't think so.
Hmm.
Maybe 100 years, maybe 75, 50 is potentially like, I mean, dogs have changed for sure. Um, I think e-collars have played a little bit of a role in things, but I think like, we used to shoot dogs with 9 shot, in training. Kind of, when I say we, I mean our predecessors. And and the zeitgeist did not condemn that the way it would today. Um, uh, uh, I think are we talking about breeding softer dogs? I think I don't know. I don't think so. I think a lot of people though we're more sensitive, and I think that makes us more sensitive to what the dog is going through, and we're less inclined to develop resilience in our dogs from the get go. And I think so. One thing I love about Napopo and that line of thinking is that developing resilience is built into it by making it like helping the dog have a relationship with pressure, quote unquote pressure, allowing for that relationship to develop early. I think a lot of people, I think a lot of people don't exercise intent with that stuff early enough, and then they come to it later and they need to use it, and then a big part of that is training and drive and so on and so forth, and we can get into that, or we've already covered that kind of stuff. But yeah, I mean, to answer your question simply, I think we make a lot more out of we have softer dogs today than we did. I just think we have softer people today than we did.
I mean, I agree with you on that one.